Welcome and thank you for joining with us for Pratibha Vindana today. We have a special conversation today and have the honor of speaking with the Mahayana Buddhist nun whose life is dedicated to the path of wisdom, compassion and service. In Mahayana Buddhism, the path is not only focused on personal liberation but on helping all sentient beings awaken, a journey embodied by the Bodhisattva ideal. Through this interview, we hope to gain deeper insight into the Mahayana Buddhism and lived experience of a Buddhist nun and how ancient wisdom continues to guide and inspire us in the modern world. Thank you, Venerable Tenzin Lekdron, the founder of Tara Lanka Foundation, for being here with us today. And to start with our conversation, can you share your journey into monastic life and what drew specifically into Mahayana path?
First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to have this discussion. I'd like to set our motivation that we are doing this discussion to broaden the understanding between Theravada and Mahayana traditions, and we hope that this will benefit everyone who listens will have a broader understanding. So how did I come to Mahayana? In fact, I wasn't sort of looking for Mahayana Buddhism. I left Sri Lanka when I was 22, and in my 30s I was living in Australia, and I had a sort of great desire to reconnect with the Dharma because I had not been practicing. I was married with 2 children, so my life was very busy. But then that need arose. First of all, I went to a Buddhist temple in Melbourne, and that was a Sri Lankan Buddhist temple. And I felt like I was still looking for something more, that I wanted very much to be able to ask questions, and it was a different engagement that I was looking for. So in my search, I heard the name Dalai Lama. I had no idea who he was. I knew he was a monk and he was from Tibet. So I happened to walk into a bookshop one day and I picked up a book called Beyond Religion. And I read that book. The rest is history. It touched me deeply. And I thought, my goodness, there are people who explain the Dharma in such an accessible way. So that's how I connected with the Mahayana path.
Okay, and can you tell us what inspired you to become a nun and what were some of the key challenges you faced during ordination and training?
So that's an interesting question because I am the least nun-like person in life. I was. I had a lot of passion for life, and but my search for freedom was there from get-go. So in my 30s, having connected and met my teacher, my root teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it innately sort of came up for me in my sort of late 30s. What if I could spend my life more meaningfully? You know, the rest of whatever I have left, what could I do with the rest of my life? And a little voice in my head said, practice Dharma. So you have to remember I had a family by then, I was working, you know, and I was thinking, how might I arrive at this, you know, what does that mean to practice Dharma? And another voice just said within myself, become a nun. You know, and I remembered when I was about 9 years old, sitting in my father's lap, telling my father, I think I'm going to be a nun when I grow up. And of course, one dismisses these things, thinking, of course, every girl, every daughter wants to please their father. And my father was a Buddhist and he built temples and I would have observed that. So I very much dismissed that. I could say that I didn't choose to be a nun. The nunhood chose me because I tried to push it aside, saying I've got responsibilities, I can't possibly be a nun in the West. But it became so strong that I had to take it seriously. I asked my Lama, about this strong feeling that was coming up. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche said it was very worthwhile, but I must go to His Holiness the Dalai Lama to get ordained. So when I tried to do that, of course, many sicknesses, many obstacles came before I was able to go and actually become a nun in 2016.
Oh, you mentioned that your Lama gave specific instructions to you. So can you share something about that?
Yes, I'm very, very excited to share these instructions with you. My main teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, indeed gave me a kind of a Herculean project, which really was very scary when I first when I got the instructions from him. Just to give you a little background, when I went to Sri Lanka, before I went to Sri Lanka, I was living in Kopan Nunnery, and there was an earthquake in Nepal. So I went to my Lama and asked what I should do, because we were instructed to leave Nepal in 2016. And Lama Zopa said I could go to Sri Lanka or I could go to Australia. Both is okay. And I thought I would go to Sri Lanka for a period of time and then return to Nepal. But what happened was, when I went to Sri Lanka, people were very curious about these robes, and I had many questions. So that made me ask further questions from my teacher. And first of all, he recommended that we start reciting Golden Light Sutra, which is very useful for purification. So at the time, 2016, 2017, you have to remember the environment in Sri Lanka was not very good. So he said for purification, this text would be very useful. And to my amazement, I met a professor who had translated a number of Mahayana sutras, including the Golden Light Sutra, Swarnaprabha Suttama Sutra. So I met him again through other people, and we started reciting this sutra. And amazingly, invitations started coming from groups of people to come and recite it. 300 people, 500 people. Very unusual thing. So after we had done at least 3,000 recitations of Golden Light Sutra, I asked Lama Zopa Rinpoche what to do, because Sri Lanka was in a very difficult political situation. It had run out of money, basically. And it is very interesting. Swarnaprabha Suttama Sutra, in my observation, brings up all of the dysfunction, whether it's a Dharma center or a country or in your personal life. So this was all out in the open now. And Lama Zopa said, now it would be very useful for you to build Medicine Buddha, Baisaji Guru statue, and introduce Sri Lankan people to the concept of healing and well-being. So I was thinking, how am I going to introduce Sri Lankan people to a Buddha that they are very unfamiliar with, never heard of? How would I do this? And that sent me on a search, and I found out that all three traditions, in fact, Mahayana Theravada traditions, were practiced side by side in Sri Lanka up until 12th century. So I came across Veda Mahatyas who recite the Baisaji Guru mantra, but they have no idea where it came from. So I thought I must take a first step in building this statue, because what the measurements of the statue Lama Zopa recommended was 15 meters, ginormous. So luckily for us, he also personally hand drew the face of a Buddha, the Baisaji Guru statue. I have managed to build a prototype, 1.5 meters, and the whole journey has been quite amazing. So while this is all going on, I have to tell you, I have been very fortunate to receive specific instructions. So this has become the way I overcome my fears, develop confidence, and learn about my capacity, learn about the power of prayer, and believing that we can make a difference. So it has been quite a journey.
Okay. Can you kind of explain what are the defining teachings that distinguish Mahayana from other Buddhist traditions?
Look, I think the idea that people have that Mahayana is vastly different from Theravada and Buddhism is a great misconception. Theravada and Buddhism is the foundation of Mahayana Buddhism. So we have the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Noble Path and all of that. And in Sri Lanka, we talk about the Tuntara Bodhya. So we know that Buddha taught 3 paths, and whichever path each individual person chooses to is very much accepted. And in fact, in Sri Lanka, we have inscriptions that the king of this country should only be a bodhisattva. So we are very familiar, The difference is, I would say Mahayana is like an attitude. It is more of an attitude. So if somebody's got a very tight mind and they think everything has to be this way, that way, building very tight parameters around, the Dharma has to come from this language, it has to have, proof of this kind, because the simple truth is very few things to do with Buddhist philosophy, Buddha's life, any of these things can be categorically proven, So we got to understand there is one Buddha, and many traditions came about from that. And we bring a cultural component to it. People in Japan practice Mahayana differently to people in Tibet, for instance. So the methods are different, but the aim is exactly the same.
Okay, it's good to know, and it's really interesting because we always think Mahayana and Theravada is 2 different.
Absolutely. The conception is that Mahayana and Theravada is opposite of each other, against each other. Or that, this leads me to something else we discussed before, that what are the misconceptions about Mahayana? And I can speak from personal experience here. A lot of things that people have asked me is, do Mahayana monks marry, for instance? And I'd like to give a background to this question, that this happened in Japan at a particular period. Meiji Emperor made it a secular country, and he brought in a law that even if they are monks, this is a secular country, even if it is a monk, they have to get married. They can't keep pratimoksha vows. So when that happened, it was not possible for monks to keep the pratimoksha vows anymore. So they had to abandon the vow and become a householder, kind of, they take care of temples, but they don't hold pratimoksha vows, only bodhisattva vows. So they follow the Dharma, but they don't keep the brahmacharya. But this only happened in that country. Every other country, if you have taken the pratimoksha vows, you got to keep the vows. No different to Theravada. So it's a great misunderstanding to think that all Mahayana monks marry, which is not the case. And another thing that I get asked is that they are opposite of each other. And this is also, as we talked before, no, the foundation is what we share, the teachings, what we share. The three paths that Buddha taught, we accept. So what is the difference? And I think if you already have a kind of an expansive view, if you're relaxed, you're already Mahayana. One other thing I want to mention is, it is with great sadness that I have to say these differences were very much exaggerated by Western scholars, because up until 1893, the various Buddhists from different countries have not even met. So the Western scholars organized a conference in Chicago that brought Buddhists from different countries, and they were scholars. So Chinese Buddhists, China is a major Mahayana country, Buddhist country, but they didn't even participate in this because they didn't hear about the conference. But the other people came and they were represented sort of globally, had representation. And the Western scholars could see that people in Tibet practiced Buddhism differently to someone in Japan. someone in Thailand practices differently to someone in Vietnam. And they started looking for differences at that point because they didn't understand the core teachings. They didn't examine and do research about each country and how they brought in Dharma to their lives. So they thought, people practice differently. This is very different. Burma, Thailand, and Sri Lanka have completely different Buddhism to other countries. China they didn't even know, but Tibet, Vietnam, Korea, like that. So they started dividing us geographically, or Northern Buddhism, Southern Buddhism, or Pali canon, Sanskrit canon, and presented as these are very different from each other. And the scholars who went from Sri Lanka and other countries just verbatim brought that information back and just rewrote it and gave it to the people in our country. So that really has become concretized. People didn't have access to texts to see what Mahayana people are studying, so they thought, it's something really against the Buddha's teachings. But Walpala Rahula Thero, because he traveled overseas and he studied extensively, he was a great Sri Lankan scholar, he wrote many articles sort of pointing this out, thinking what a tragedy it was that the Western scholars exaggerated the difference between our two traditions.
Okay, that was really interesting. And can I ask that what are the defining techniques, teachings that distinguish Mahayana from other Buddhist traditions then?
So again, I have to come back to the attitude. It is what defines the Maha, great thinking is having an open, relaxed mind, thinking about all sentient beings as equally as ourselves. They are all suffering, having that understanding and acknowledgement. In fact, I want to tell you about Lama Atisha, who is a giant in Tibetan Buddhism. He helped bring Tibetan Buddhism to Tibet. He said, he wrote a book called The Lamp of the Path, on the Path, and he mentions that there are 4 types of people in the world that can benefit from the Dharma, from Buddhist teachings. One is that people who want to make this life better, all kinds of emotional issues, they need some sort of advice for those. Then some other people think about where we are going. They believe in afterlife, so they think there's a rebirth. They'd like to make that life better as well. Third kind of people is they know nirvana is the ultimate peace. They want to go to nirvana. Another kind of person think other people are suffering just like me, so I want to do something for them as well, and we can all go to nirvana. There are these, all 4 types of people have something to gain from the Dharma. Buddha accommodated all these kinds of thinking, which is very, very special. So, and our Lama, one of our Lamas, Lama Yeshe, used to say, Buddhism is like an American bed. It's ginormous, it has space for everybody. So this is very interesting. And dividings, you have to be this way or that way. This opens up to even other religions. They can use Buddhist tools, mindfulness or any kind of other techniques that we have. In fact, they do. When you look at CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, they have incorporated Buddhist techniques. So there is no room for us to divide and stay separate. There is so much knowledge about how close we are.
Yeah, it is. We learned that compassion is central in Mahayana thought. So how do you cultivate compassion in your everyday life?
Yeah, so first of all, compassion is an action. It doesn't come naturally. Apparently, little children have it innately. But as we grow, we harden our hearts and we sort of become tightened to the pain and suffering of the world. So part of what I have tried to do is to just develop empathy and be mindful about what I see around myself, and wherever I can be of service. If I can be of service by being a good listener, having some patience and giving my time, if I can give something material, then I will do that. For instance, in Sri Lanka, I'm working with girls who have had many challenges in their lives. So when I saw them, I could see that they were really helpless. And I could do something, although limited, but I could bring some expertise, bring some support for education and things like that. So I think these things are very simple. We are not going to do vast deeds in our mundane lives, and I think I try to practice with people around me. There is many irritations and many frustrations and many disappointments, and how do I deal with it? How do I internalize compassion in these very difficult circumstances? So I'm trying to put some techniques into practice, and the best I could do is catch myself when I make a mistake, and then be forgiving to myself, because we have to extend that compassion to ourselves too. So equalizing ourselves with others, there has to be a balance.
Yeah. So when we talk about compassion, I know that you are working on a healing project in Sri Lanka. So can we talk about that, and can you explain a little bit more?
So I explained a little bit about the medicine Buddha. So because Sri Lanka doesn't have much awareness about many Buddhas, these Buddhas are like energies. There are certain enlightened qualities like healing, and these qualities are available within us as well. So the outer Buddhas help us to develop our innate Buddha-like qualities. What I'm doing in Sri Lanka is, because we have come out of a war, we have peace at the moment, but the mental suffering has not ended. When we face something really for a prolonged period of time, we end up with sort of after effects of these. So trauma is in the conversations these days. A lot of results of trauma. What is left over and what stops us from moving forward, because we can't develop loving kindness and compassion while we ourselves are tremendously stuck and suffering. So part of my projects is creating awareness about this particular aspect of the population. Whether you have been directly participating in the war, you have experienced it some way, you have heard it for a prolonged period of time. All of these things have an effect on our mind, and I'm very interested, and I'm working to bring awareness to this particular state of mind so we can move beyond it. We can be loving and kind and compassionate.
Can we talk about how does Mahayana Buddhism approach the idea of nirvana, especially in relation to samsara?
So really, this question used to drive me mad, because one of the ways that one of the teachers, great teachers of Mahayana from Nalanda monastery in India, describes nirvana as samsara and nirvana are two sides of the same coin. So I used to wrap my brain, because I had this idea nirvana is you're going somewhere, you're sort of free of all of the afflictions and you go somewhere. But later, as I studied, I understood that samsara and nirvana are two attitudes to this life. If we understand how we exist, like if we don't have lobha, dvesha, moha, three poisons, we are in nirvana, because we become lighter, we are happier, we don't have envy, we don't have anger, we don't have attachment, we are not grasping, we become lighter. So we do the same things, we might have a job, we get married, we have children, we go about our life, but we are not creating that. We know this is going to end. So we know that our lives, every one of us have a beginning and an end. So when disappointments come, we are kind of ready in our mind, we are not going to be totally shocked and create anger and hatred. Anger is one thing, but we hold on to things and we create hatred. So now I understand, if we hold things lightly, we have some emotional resilience, we understand what life is about, how we exist, and how damaging it is for us to have these negative emotions like hatred and attachment so strongly that it damages ourselves. We are in nirvana. What more kind of nirvana do we need?
Okay, Mahayana emphasized the concept of emptiness. How would you explain this to someone who is unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, Mahayana doesn't own this concept of emptiness, because Theravada talks about the Tilakshana and Anatma. This is very much embedded in Theravada Buddhism. So what Mahayana masters did is write commentary and explain it further. So this emptiness, first of all, we have to understand, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So this is what the Buddha said. We have to get away from the two extremes of thinking that something exists permanently. When we die, for instance, some religions may say we go to heaven forever or hell forever. We don't believe that in the Dharma, and we don't believe that there is no next life, there is no me. There is no point in believing karma, there's no consequences, so we're not believing in that either. So we are saying that what doesn't exist is something permanent. So there's no Atma or self that goes from life to life. There's nothing independent. We come about as our parents get together, many circumstances come together, and we are born, we have a particular kind of look, we have a particular gender, we have a particular circumstances, good or bad, or challenging or not. All of these things are causes and conditions that comes about as our individual karma. So then we don't exist independently. So this is the main teaching the Shunyata talks about. There is no unchanging core to anybody. Then Master Nagarjuna from India, from the Nalanda monastery, and subsequent teachers like Master Aryadeva, who came from Sri Lanka, wrote much commentary explaining not only ourselves but every object, all phenomena lack this inherent independent existence. So to somebody who has never heard of this concept, I will say, think about life as a dream. Because apparently, as we understand the teachings more, we understand how a dream works. While we are dreaming, we are going through the emotions, we are feeling everything. It's so real to us in our dream. And we feel fear, and we feel sadness, and we feel happiness and excitement. We wake up and go, wow, I had this amazing dream, or I had this very scary dream. In fact, when you think that there is no core, independent beings, our family, our surroundings, so it's like a hologram. We are going through this life like a dream, but we don't see it that way. But we can think, even though I don't see my life like in a dream, this is how it is. So we can become a little lighter about it. Everything exists like in a dream.
Can we go into the modern society, and then how has Mahayana Buddhism evolved to meet modern challenges such as gender equality, technology, and global unrest?
Mm-hmm. Responses, yeah. So in terms of the female issues between gender, I think I can only speak for Tibetan Buddhism. I can say that Koreans and Chinese are very much advanced in the way that they respect the female monastics, and I think that's a reflection of how their society is. Korean monks, for instance, bow to the Korean nuns, saying, I bow to the Buddha nature in you, and the nun bows back. They bow to each other, which is quite amazing. Whereas Tibetan tradition, they had to actually lobby and fight hard to get equal education, the right to become a Geshima. The Geshe studies are 25 years long. So female monastics didn't have that opportunity, but during the last 10-15 years, that opportunity has been presented, and they are doing really well. So in terms of technology and other issues in engaging with the world, various ethnic and religious wars happening, disharmony. The main example I can think of is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He has spent, having left Tibet, as a refugee when Chinese invaded Tibet, he has spent at least 50 years of his 90-year life, or 60, 70 years of his life in exile to build harmony. Living in India, he engages with every kind of person, every religious leader, and there is so much mutual respect. He does that with such humility. He can meet with the highest politician, the scientist, the scholar. He started mind science conferences, an institution. He emphasized that for the 21st century, we cannot present the Dharma in a classic way. People will not understand it. They have shorter attention spans. Our children are not going to be listening to long discourses. We have to engage with science. We have to back it up. So he's contacted scientists from Harvard and started a conference that has grown to involve from every sphere of science, because he said Buddha's teachings lack nothing. Before science can catch up, Buddha has already taught how things exist. This is the question. And now science is catching up and saying, yes, things move. If somebody is watching at a situation, the atoms behave differently. So there is that modern dialogue showing monks, that educated monks who can actually speak the scientist language. It is very much enriching everybody's understanding of what Buddha taught. We are selling ourselves very short if we don't engage with the technology, engage with other forms of practitioners, scientists, atheists, every kind of being. So he is the best.
Okay, it is. Can we talk about how do you personally maintain peace and clarity in a world filled with distractions and suffering nowadays?
Yeah, well, $1 million question. How does anyone keep a peaceful mind? And, it is very challenging. But I'm very much grateful. I'm very, very grateful for the Dharma. The only thing that gives a context to what is happening in the world, why is there so much suffering? Why is there people like this and that? And why are the leaders behaving in such a way that they don't have empathy? All these things is, within Buddha's teachings. If we neglect our mind, if we don't develop empathy and compassion and loving kindness, we end up very cruel and causing ourselves and others harm. If we don't understand there are consequences to our actions, we will not think about what happens, in the future. So we perpetuate this kind of suffering. When you look at war zones in certain countries, it hasn't come about, this today. These things, the causes were planted many, many years ago, and the conditions were left untended. Nobody made peace, and it has now erupted in massive wars and danger to the whole world. So how I get some perspective on that is connecting to my surroundings and the people I love. I have 2 children, I have grandchildren, and they keep me really grounded. Their beautiful smiles and their openness and their love is a reminder that it gives me hope, that it gives me courage, that we have to keep going no matter what. And we have to look for people who think like us, and we have to think of what we can do within our own spaces. How can we develop our own minds? How can we show kindness and love to our loved ones? How can we be more forgiving to others? How can we be more patient? How can we be fun? How can we bring light and joy to this terrifying world, So we can be a beacon of hope. So this is small things that I connect with and try to do, on a consistent basis as much as I can. I don't always succeed, but I think these simple things is what things we can do. And I also, another thing I do is to think about inspiration, to find inspiration in the darkest of times. And one person that comes to mind is, of course, Nelson Mandela. When he had such a grueling, hard life, he came out of it. The kindness is palpable, visible in his face and his actions. And I heard another story. A Lama from Tibet was sent to jail for 25 years and he was tortured. He was a high Lama, he was a great practitioner. And after 25 years of being in the jail, he was released. So Dalai Lama, who is in Dharmasala, got word of it and he invited this Lama to come and meet him. So when this Rinpoche came to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama asked him, were you in grave danger? What was it like in the jail? And he says, yes, I was in grave danger. I was in grave danger. I was in danger of losing my compassion for the enemy. So when I heard that, I was, wow. And he was really genuine about it, And I felt like, my gosh, there are people who live and think like this, And it gives hope. It shows my potential to me. Like Buddha went through, we have heard about many lives that he made aspirations and he hung on to it, even though he was not perfect, But there is one aspiration that he wants to benefit others as well as himself. And I find that gives you sort of extra passion. This is not a burden. Because you understand that there's not much difference, even though we feel a big difference. But when you actually break it down and have a look, when we learn about our consciousness and this mere body that goes to another life, and the fact that there is nothing independent that goes from life to life, we see the similarity and our desire to be happy. Nobody, from the smallest insect of an ant to the wealthiest human being and the most successful human being, wants just simply to be happy. And if we can understand that, we see the commonality between humans and even animals, so it's greatly encouraging. We understand our capacity and we can make a difference.
Definitely. Yes, so to finish our conversation, can I ask, what advice would you give to lay people who wish to follow Mahayana path in their everyday lives?
I would say laugh a lot. Have a light heart. I mean, having listened to many teachings and many meditation methods and many high lamas and all of that, Buddha's teachings for many, 25, 30 years, I understand that having a relaxed mind, don't get hung up, uptight about anything. We can die at any minute. So the most important thing is to be light-hearted, have curiosity, don't judge ourselves and others. These are things that we can cultivate wherever we are. And these are very hard. Don't get me wrong. It is very hard to be non-judgmental or to be light-hearted because we take ourselves very seriously, even practice becomes like we got to do practice and, be a Buddhist nun, or I have to be this, or I have to be that. So once you start dropping that, we can start laughing at ourselves. And that is the best practice. From that, anything, we can develop. We can think about other things if we are relaxed. So that's my best advice.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Venerable Tenzin Lekdron, for your thoughts today, sharing your wisdom and your heart and thoughts with us today. Your insights into the Mahayana path, from the Bodhisattva ideal to the practice of compassion in everyday life, have been truly meaningful. Your reflections offer not just knowledge, but a gentle reminder of the power of presence, kindness, and inner clarity in a world that often feels chaotic. So we are grateful for the opportunity to learn from you, and we hope this conversation inspires others to explore the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism and bring more compassion into their lives. May your path continue to be peaceful and of benefit to all beings. Thank you. Theruvan Saranai.
Theruvan Saranai, and I'd like to dedicate this positive merit that we created, positive potential, for the benefit of all suffering beings in this world, and for us to have realizations and understand, to be free from suffering forever as soon as we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining with us for Pratibha Vindana today. So we'll see you again on another similar discussion soon. Thank you.